We give thanks this morning for the gift of another day of life. We give thanks for the Chartres community. We give thanks for the flame of life, uniting the worlds through our bodies. We come together as community and we sing. May the gifts of this community, the gifts of Chartres Cathedral, the gifts of the Sacred Hill, of the Carnoots, of the Gaul, of our ancestors, may those gifts become enacted in this call and in our lives. And we give thanks for this moment of great change in the planet. Noah.
Thank you, Apila. Welcome, everyone, to our November community call for the Chartres Academy. It's been one of those tech glitch days getting to this moment. Wi-Fi's have been challenges. Georg, we thought for a while that Rick couldn't get his internet to work, and so we were going after Georg Bach, who you all know, and his wife just had a baby about 45 minutes ago, so he couldn't pull himself away. And then Rick found the internet, and meanwhile Banafshe lost her internet, and we've been scurrying around to get to the church on time. But welcome, all of you. We meet at a beautiful moment after the US presidential election. And so we've come together in part to celebrate, in part to share concerns about work that is yet to be done. And we have a very, very full program. We'll be hearing from a number of people, Ann Baring, Shelley Alcorn, Kayleen Asbo, Apila, and hopefully others of you. But we want to start, as we always have done in Chartres since the very beginning, with some astrological kind of notations on the momentousness of our time. So we reached out to our wonderful Lynn Bell, who, as you remember, always follows Apila in our Chartres academies there in Chartres. So Lynn, welcome to the program, and take a few minutes and just lay out the astrological significance of this moment.
Okay. Hi, Jim. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here with all of you at this moment. And it was fascinating to watch what happened from an astrological point of view. Back in September, I was on a panel for ICER, one of the main astrological organizations, with 4 other colleagues. And we all thought that the decision would not be made the day of the elections because Mercury was retrograde and changed direction on the very day. Now, we might think, oh, that's great. But in fact, when a planet is retrograde and changes direction, it's extremely slow of motion. And as it began to move forward, it was in an exact square to Saturn. So the whole experience we had of stasis, of stalling, of anxiety, are we ever going to move through this barrier, is really well described. And Saturday morning is the moment where Mercury got past Saturn. So it feels wonderful, and there are some very complex things going on in the sky. One is that Mars is retrograde in Aries, and I've been thinking a lot about Mars retrograde as a quiet form of courage, because many of us are back in confinement. I am, Jim is, and other people in Europe, and some of you in the US. And this whole idea that we can't move just yet, we can't go forward just yet. It's the big idea of the moment celestially. And what's fascinating to watch is Venus in this, Mars is in its own sign. And Venus, who is the opposing principle of Mars, is moving to an exact opposition in her sign. Now, this hasn't happened in many, many years. This is a really unusual experience for these planets to oppose when they're each in their own signs. And it has to do with a moment on, in the next couple of days, Venus exactly opposes Mars. And it has to do with, what do we really want to happen? What is our wish for the world? And more than our wish, what is our intention for the world? Mars will go direct on the 13th of November, but its direct motion will not be visible until about the 24th. Now, when Mars is stationary, it can have an energy of extraordinary focus, a little bit like a magnifying glass concentrating a ray of light. And this moment of Mars retrograde, for all of us, we're asked to go inward and look at our intention and not be reactive or explosive. Or now, I find while I'm celebrating and jubilant with many people, I've also caught glimpses of people who are wildly in wild conspiracy, who are angry, who feel that things have been stolen from them, who are suspicious of everything that the media says. So there's a lot of heat sitting there with that Mars retrograde. And all we can do to keep it from bursting into flame in any way, not just in ourselves, but in our relationships and in the world around us is incredibly important. It's as if we're watching something that could so easily flip into destruction, I suppose. I don't think that will happen. There is a huge amount of awareness and an enormous desire to not be in the state we've been in for so long. Now, as Mars, the period, when Mars moves forward, the period where it begins to move and open up the space, it's also interesting because it again squares the big three planets. It's again going to the conflicts that have been in especially in the US, will again be reactivated between now and the inauguration. So there are these dates. There are these dates that could be potentially problematic, the 13th of November and the 14th of December, which is a solar eclipse. And I'd like to think of that solar eclipse as the moment when a lot of the darkness and the doubt and the shadow and the destructive energy of this time is actually being released, being ejected from the collective psyche and the body of the world. And that the solar eclipse on December 14th is at 24 degrees of Sagittarius. 26 Sagittarius is the galactic center. So we have to go through a process of purging, of holding our desires very clearly, very much at the center, then go through a process of purging. And then 8 days after that, we have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, which I've talked to the group about before at the very first degree of Aquarius, which brings in a new 20-year cycle, and with it a new almost 160-year cycle of conjunctions in air signs. And what it's bringing in is something that I think of as the winged idea. There actually is a new template for the future, which is up there, and which we can use our awareness to call in. It probably won't come in until that time, until the winter solstice. But it will be something new will start animating us and moving us. And among part of that newness, part of that new vision is also how we can see what's been moving through the other half. How we have gotten to this point of almost enmity and misunderstanding, and how we can see it all at the same time. How we can enlarge our vision to be, and our hearts, but particularly our vision in the sign of Aquarius, and our awareness that there is another way to be together and to be in the world. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Lynn, very much. It's always good to know how the planets are aligning as we go through these momentous events on the ground. So thank you for that. And, as we always do, we'll keep the astrological framework in our minds as we traverse the next couple of months, everyone. And I just wanted to say that, we want to really honor this post-election moment by being spacious about this call. Normally, we try to have everything done in an hour, but it may go beyond an hour. And I just hope everybody can kind of just relax into a certain spaciousness with regards to our deliberations together. Because we want to make sure in the first instance, as we proceed into the program, that everybody's just caught up to date on what is unfolding and what is in store. And for that, I'd like to turn it over to Shelley, who you all know, who has been providing daily updates on Humanity Rising since last Monday in a very, very compelling and concise and timely way. So Shelley, bring us here on Sunday, the 8th of November, 5 days on, give us the updates from the front line.
I'm very happy to do that. I have a smile today, everybody. I don't think anyone's seen that for a while. I am pleased to report that the United States of America has just survived a near-death experience. We have had a victory in that forces of totalitarianism have been stalled in the United States for the time being. As we're continuing to watch the election returns come in, it does appear to me that the Electoral College spread will be so big that it will be really hard to get that many faithless electors to perhaps throw the election inside the Electoral College on December 14th. Now, I'm not going to breathe fully until December 14th, but that appears to be the case. The violence that was expected failed to materialize to a large extent. The protests that were expected failed to materialize to a large extent. There have been sporadic outbursts across the country. Donald Trump continues to refuse to accept the results of the election. He is popping off on Twitter again today. However, a number of things have happened. Former President George W. Bush has congratulated Joe Biden on his election. That's going to start taking the temperature down on the part of other Republicans who are continuing to holler about recounts and lawsuits and those sorts of things. They really are fighting an uphill battle at this point. And I think we can breathe that we have a new president, a new vice president, woman of color in the United States. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's wonderful to see. That being said, like Lynn said, there is still a long way to go until January 20th. We don't necessarily expect it to be quiet. For example, yesterday on Friday afternoon, Trump forced out 3 agency heads, the agency heads that oversee international aid, the agency head that works on electricity and natural gas regulation, and oddly enough, the head of the National Nuclear Security Administration, Lisa Gordon. I forgot what her last name is. She was forced to resign yesterday. So I think we're going to see a lot of firings, a lot of retribution, a lot of revenge, a lot of disruption. And I think we meet it the way we have been meeting all of these challenges, with intention, with purpose, with compassion, with strength, with courage. And that will take us through the next few months. That is sort of the extent of the update. I am celebrating, I am happy, I am thrilled. We still have a moment of reckoning inside the United States, in that 70 million of our citizens did vote for Donald Trump. And the election was delivered by women and by our BIPOC brothers and sisters. And we absolutely owe them a debt of gratitude once again for helping save the soul of the nation and put us in a place where we can begin to do the hard work. Over the last couple of weeks, as you've seen me on different programs and different things about ubiquity, I've been echoing the words of Timothy Snyder and Masha Gessen, Umair Haque. Today, I would just like to leave you with some inspiration that I'm taking to heart right now from Hannah Arendt, from The Origins of Totalitarianism. It'll take me a minute to read this, but I think these are words that I'm finding comforting now. And keeping us in the right frame of mind, that recrimination has to end, but that boundaries need to be drawn on what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, treatment of humans, dignity, international relationships, and life, including our species and this planet. So words from Hannah Arendt. It is in the moment of defeat that the inherent weakness of the totalitarian propaganda becomes visible. Without the force of the movement, its members cease at once to believe in the dogma for which yesterday they were still ready to sacrifice their lives. The moment the movement, that is the fictitious world which sheltered them, is destroyed, the masses revert to their old status of isolated individuals who either happily accept a new function in a changed world or sink back into their old desperate superfluousness. The members of totalitarian movements, utterly fanatical as long as the movement exists, will not follow the example of religious fanatics and die the deaths of martyrs, even though they were only too willing to die the death of robots. Rather, they will quietly give up the movement as a bad bet and look around for another promising fiction, or wait until the former fiction regains enough strength to establish another mass movement. So as we move forward from here, let's please keep this in mind. Trump is already talking about a run for the presidency in 2024. I have no idea what the next few months will bring, but please let's stand together in love and appreciation and in victory that we did it. And let's please continue to move forward on behalf of our citizens in this country, but also our friends and neighbors, allies, and people that we love all around the world. So thanks for having me this morning, and peace to you all.
If I can make just a quick comment, I think it is an extraordinary statement on the part of the American people that even with a pandemic, even with massive and systematic voter suppression, even with the President of the United States doing everything in his power, which is considerable, to scare people off and to denigrate the electoral process. We just had an election in the United States that drew more people to the ballot box than at any time in our history. And the election, for the most part, in the face of active sabotage, basically worked. And the Federal Election Commission, one of the commissioners said it was nearly a flawless election. There's a little bit of glitches and so forth, but we just pulled off in the United States something about which I think history will long remember. That when it came down to the longest continuous democracy in the world being assaulted by the man in the White House, the American people stood firm. And that, to me, is the achievement of the election. And I think what Shelley wrote or read from Anna Arendt, secondly, is worth commenting on as well. And that is that in the face of defeat, the Trumpists will melt away, but that spirit, like the spirit of Sauron in Lord of the Rings, endures and will look for the next opportunity to incarnate. And that's why, in my view, the most important thing that the US people and government can do is to ensure that Trump pays for his crimes and goes to prison. The worst thing that could happen now is not to finish the job. And so I think we are in that moment of euphoria, having just triumphed institutionally, I would say. We have 2 months to go, over 60 days, during which Trump will continue to wreak havoc out of the Oval Office. And with all the planetary contradictions and convolutions, it's not a clear alignment out there in the heavens. It's complicated. You know, we're all going to have to understand that. And I think the question is, for me, in the end, how do we serve as a bridge over troubled waters? How do we as a community bring solace to whoever it is that's alienated, confused, and looking for someone to blame? Somehow, America has to heal itself. And I don't think it's going to come from any of the major institutions in some mysterious and, I would say, miraculous way. It needs to come from us. And I don't even know what that means. But I know that that's the task at hand, is to somehow be the balm of Gilead, as it says in the scripture. And how we do it, who we do it with, is clearly the task of a spiritual mature being and a spiritually mature community. So I just wanted to offer those brief reflections and that inquiry as to how we serve moving forward as a framework. So now I thought it would be good to hear from one of our elders, Anne Baring. And then when Anne's done, we'll hear from Apila, who's been working, as many of you know, very hard and vigorously with her dream group. So there'll be a little report for the dream group. Dreams are so important during this time. And then we'll have a word from Kayleen, and then we'll proceed from there. So thank you, everyone. And now, Anne, please join us.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Jim, for your wonderful words. And thanks also to Shelley for reading that passage. Very, very powerful and moving. So the tension has broken. The collective sigh of relief is huge. And it is indeed, as Jim said, a momentous moment or momentous time. We can celebrate the fact that the arduous process of counting millions of votes in the midst of a deadly pandemic has shown that democracy in America, though fragile, still works. But the country is split in two. 70 million people voted for Trump, 74 million for Biden. Trump, like a rogue elephant, is grievously wounded and will certainly not give up without a fight, nor will his supporters. What is alarming for the rest of the world is that such an unbalanced man could have been elected president and had his hand on the nuclear button for 4 years. Joe Biden, with his mature and empathic character and his long experience in the political field, may be able to heal this great split and address the immense problems that need attention. He has wisely chosen Kamala Harris, a woman of color, to be his vice president. He has said that one of his first acts will be to reunite the children with the parents from whom they were separated at the Mexican border. And he has pledged $2 trillion over the next 4 years to turbocharge climate policy and institute a green agenda. But will the Senate and the powerful oil industry block this agenda? Something vital to the whole world could be put at risk by internal politics. Before I go further, I should say that I'm 3/4 American. My mother and my father's mother were both American, and I spent the war years being educated in America. My closest friends are American. So what happens in America is of great interest to me. America is the richest, most powerful nation on the planet. The ethos she lives by and the values that guide her are of great significance for other nations. It is of deep concern to many Americans that their government, while professing to act beneficently for America and the world, has been acting for some time to subvert the very ideals and values it professes to serve. This concern arose during the presidency of George W. Bush, his alliance with Tony Blair, and their disastrous invasion of Iraq. But it has grown greatly during the Trump presidency for obvious reasons. To many people, it appears as if America has succumbed to inflated beliefs that endanger both itself and the world. What are these beliefs? The belief in technological and industrial progress, regardless of the threat of climate change or harm to the planet. The belief that America has the right to control the world by military and corporate power. The belief that God is on America's side. The belief that America has the right to initiate preemptive, preventive, or punitive wars and to develop, hold, and use nuclear weapons if she so chooses. Those are the words of George W. Bush. The belief that America is above international law and need not be bound by the United Nations, the Geneva Convention, or the International Criminal Court, or in the case of Trump, the Paris Accords on climate change. Looking at these beliefs and at the presidencies of both George W. Bush and Donald Trump, we can see that their main feature is hubris, or an inflated conviction of entitlement to absolute power. This addiction to absolute power originates in the unconscious shadow, both of individuals and nations. As, generally speaking, we are unaware of this shadow, it can easily take possession of us, manifesting as the will to power in any number of different fields. Where does this shadow drive for absolute power originate? It originates in an archaic solar mythology that first appears around 1700 BCE and speaks of a great cosmic battle between the forces of light and darkness, good and evil, portrayed as a battle between a god or hero and a dragon, serpent, or monster. So enduring is its influence that in the presidency of George W. Bush, it manifested as the battle against the axis of evil. But the whole political world is now influenced, even I would say possessed and driven by this mythology. And it deeply affects the relationship between nations and above all, their current leaders who compete with each other for absolute power. This solar mythology reflects an immense evolutionary shift in human consciousness, the formulation of an entirely new perception of life that contrasts with an older era where humanity instinctively participated in an ensouled nature and attuned itself to the rhythms of earth and cosmos. With the rise and diffusion of this new mythology, the sense of mythic participation fades. Nature becomes something to be controlled and manipulated by human ingenuity to human advantage. Earth, once alive with spirit, is desouled. The sole exception to this ethos of control and dominance was and is the indigenous people of the world, who, despite atrocious persecution, retained the older belief in the sacredness of the earth. The primary theme of this polarizing mythology is empowerment, achievement, conquest. It has inspired the drive of certain nations for technological and military supremacy, reflected in the number of nuclear weapons they hold. It has also instilled the belief in humanity's right to exploit the resources of the planet for its own exclusive benefit, leaving other species defenseless against the onslaught of its perceived rights and needs. With the huge increase in our population over the last 50 years, this belief has had a disastrous effect on the planet. In the political domain, this same polarizing mythology ratified persecutory behavior towards the dark or so-called inferior or primitive races that fell victim to the race for empire of the European nations. The indigenous people of America suffered terribly from persecution. The wrongs done to them have never been fully acknowledged or reparation made to them. Solar mythology was also the primary influence on the secular totalitarian ideologies which ravaged the world in the last century. These ideologies separated the heroic race or chosen social group from those they designated as subhuman and therefore expendable. Jung has summed up what has happened to us at the deepest level, and I think this is very important in our attempt to understand what's been happening. In our attempt to control and dominate nature, we have drawn further and further away from her until at last we believe ourselves to be separate from her, and science tells us this. Putting all emphasis on the achievements of the conscious, rational mind, we lost touch with the archaic man or woman within us, who is much closer to nature than we are. I will quote Jung's words. As scientific understanding has grown, so our world has become dehumanized. Man feels himself isolated in the cosmos because he is no longer involved in nature and has lost his emotional unconscious identity with natural phenomena. No voices now speak to man from stones, plants, and animals, nor does he speak to them believing they can hear. His contact with nature has gone. In another passage, he describes how, as the conscious mind developed and gained more and more autonomy and independence from the older matrix of the psyche, out of which it had evolved, it became disengaged from the age-old instinctive ground, out of which it has developed. So he said, consciousness, thus torn from its roots, possesses a Promethean freedom, but it also partakes of the nature of a godless hubris. The effects of our alienation from nature and the mistaken belief that we are in control of it are now apparent in all the ills and neuroses of modern civilization. Mental illness, addiction to drugs and antidepressants, epidemics of obesity, cancer, and diabetes, as well as the acts of violence erupting in the world. Alienation from nature within and without is the underlying cause of both the current pandemic and the challenge of climate change. The facts of climate change are irrefutable, yet they have barely penetrated the consciousness of current world leaders, most particularly the consciousness of Donald Trump. Sir David Attenborough, perhaps the wisest man on the planet, in his recent book and his current program on Netflix called A Life on Our Planet, says that our effect on the natural world has been catastrophic. We have become the most dominant and populous species on Earth, he says. We have come to regard the Earth as our planet, run by humankind, for humankind. We have moved from being part of nature to being apart from nature. And we need now urgently to understand that we are part of nature. Once, long ago, the world was experienced as alive with spirit. All life was sacred. Despite horrendous persecution, the indigenous people of the world retained the awareness of the sacredness of life and our kinship with all creation. For decades, they have been warning us to change course. Trump contemptuously ignored their protests at Standing Rock. I hope Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will listen to them. Insight could help us to understand the situation in which America now finds herself, and with America, the world. The real enemy is the fact that the world is held hostage to an archaic mythology that carries a very dark shadow. Ever more dangerous conflicts and pandemics will come into being until we learn how to heal the wounds we have inflicted on the biodiversity of the planet and cease our competition with each other. Our history reflects an unconscious process whereby we lost our connection to Earth and cosmos and became estranged from our deepest instincts, with the result that we are now possessed and driven by them, possibly to our own extinction. The predatory industrial and technological culture we have created, which exhausts and confuses us, stands like a tyrant over against nature, over and against the earth, and whatever threatens our supremacy and our demands as a species. Today, the fate of our species, perhaps even the fate of the earth, hangs in the balance. Will America choose to join those people all over the planet who want to serve the planet, or will it continue to live in thrall to the power-seeking values and the need for dominance and control, which has engendered so much evil and suffering? Could the soul of America that has given sanctuary to so many different people and races find the insight and courage to make an evolutionary leap, uniting the world in a transformation of consciousness that could draw humanity away from the brink of catastrophe? I will end with the words of my friend Richard Tarnas in his Passion of the Western Mind. This is the great challenge. Yet I believe it is one the Western mind has been slowly preparing itself to meet for its entire existence. I consider that much of the conflict and confusion of our own era reflects the fact that this evolutionary drama may now be reaching its climactic stages. For our time is struggling to bring forth something fundamentally new in human history. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Always so good to hear from you. You know, it's when we can put our specific dates, like a US election on November 3rd, 2020, into the larger context of the sweep of history and the rise and fall of the solar mythology and patriarchy, that we really understand how, you know, Trump fits into the larger scheme of things, how America fits into the larger scheme of things. And I think that larger perspective, for me, you know, helps us maintain a certain equilibrium about what's happening as we define the issues that really warrant our attention, as you've pointed out. So thank you for that. It may be after Apila and Kayleen, we can circle back. And I just want to encourage anyone that has any specific questions or comments, just put them in the chat and we'll try to get to them. But thank you very much, Anne, as always. Now I want to turn it over to Apila. As you all know, since the pandemic began, we've been tracking dreams. We've had a number of sessions on the Chartres calls on Humanity Rising, whole dream, I think 6 weeks that Apila curated. And now more activity has ensued. So I'm going to turn the program over to Apila and Veronica.
Thank you, Jim. So Chartres community, I ask for your indulgence because with computer stuff going on this morning, Rick and I have not streamlined this PowerPoint, which will be brief. I'd like to begin this morning in the manner that we usually begin at Chartres. We come into the St. Yves room, sit in a circle, and We began with music and chanting by Timothy. So we'll play a few seconds of that and then we'll start the PowerPoint. Okay, Rick. Okay, thank you, Rick.
Peely, you want to go to the slideshow?
Yes, please.
You should see it on your screen.
Let's see. Yes, now I'm seeing it. Okay. What I want to share with you this morning and am sharing with you is the reclamation of my own Gaul Indigenous ancestry. I came to the Hill of Chartres as an Oneida person, well-versed in my Indigenous ceremonial life and identity. What I was looking for is the humanity of my Gaul, nearly half French ancestry. And I looked to the roots. I wanted to find, if it were possible, my Indigenous Gaul, French mind. I wanted to feel the love of my ancestors again. And so the parts of my Indigenous Oneida self and Gaul self could be one. That was my personal idea and hope. Could we have the next slide, Rick? What I didn't know is that 8 weeks before, Jim Garrison and a few other people from the university and myself came to the Hill of Chartres, and we only arrived there out of a strange thing that happened in the timing of our Mary Magdalene Black Madonna tour, which launched the university, is that municipal workmen from Chartres, working on a car park at the top of the hill, had accidentally dug into a cave, a small cave that had been beneath the house of a first century Gallo-Roman person. When they dug into this small cave, amazingly, they found sequestered in a niche a box made of larch wood. The fact that the box could still exist is in itself a miracle, but conditions in the cave were absolutely perfect for holding this ritual set that was inside the box. The only ever complete Gaul ritual set ever found was kept in as much of pristine situation as would be possible. Unearthing this box unearthed more. We didn't know that when we came to Chartres. We didn't know that the ancient beings of that hill had assembled their ceremony again, and we didn't see that we were a part of this ceremony. On the goblet that you're looking at, it's showing you, and because it was Gallo-Roman, there is writing in Latin. The goblet calls to the four directions and the spirit of the Carnegal people, and we have called to those spirits at Chartres a number of times. Next slide, Rick. This is much of the set. 3, probably 4 vases with serpents wrapped around them with their heads poked into the water, the conception of life. At the top, the little open dishes are for flames. So fire of life, reigniting our European indigenous mind through the power and the agency of the hill of Chartres. Next slide. The way we do dream work at Chartres is unlike any dream work in the world. None of us are experts in dream work. Arriving at Chartres, not knowing the ancient ones on the invisible realm had us wrapped in their ceremony, we began to listen to dreams, and this process evolved. Each morning we do an invocation, we're meeting in a circle, and people share dreams. As people are sharing dreams, there's no crosstalk, of course. And while we are sharing dreams, we have people glyphing and scribing, meaning there are people graphically illustrating dreams, and there are people taking notes, so that at the end of the session, we have images of the dreams and we have a complete text of the shared dreams. After that time, the dream team meets with the glyph sheets spread before us to try to see what is the implicate order. What is the story that's emerging through dreams while we are on the hill of Chartres? In other words, what is the spirit of that hill, of that place which was the center of Gaul spirituality, of Celtic spirituality in all of Western Europe for so long? What is that sacred site saying to us? And of course, in my indigenous belief, I hold that hill as fully conscious and intelligent, more intelligent, I think, than we are. So the interesting thing is, what is the story? What is the hill wanting to say to us? What are those ancestors behind that ritual set saying to us? This is the ceremony that has evolved from Chartres. And at the end of the synthesizing, we do a reflection, a video, a PowerPoint to share back with the community the messages that we see. Next slide, please. At Chartres, the messages over the years have become more and more clear and more directive and fierce. A few years ago, this composite image shows you a number of dreams that were reported in 2017. Clean what needs cleaning, be it. Next slide, Rick. Finally, in 2019, we received the message, you do it now. There is no more time. The problem is when we receive these direct messages, how to enact them, how to embody them while we're together. And even as we're together in this call, we have the intention to make changes, to be more in alignment with our indigenous selves, with the earth. And then we separate. We come off this call. We leave Chartres. What to do? The last day of excuse me, the last day of 2019, the last day of Chartres, the dream work was done. A dream came to me and I shared it with the dream team. The dream was that we were standing on the hill of Chartres, the dream team and myself, and the hill was covered in magnificent oaks, the Druid chapel that had been there before the church, with the cave beneath the hill, the black and white rock coming together, the spring, the source of life bubbling. We were standing on that hill, and I became aware in my dream that there was something heavy in my hands. And I looked down and realized I was holding a box, the larchwood box of ritual set that we had been able to see after 14 years. I was holding a box of that. I had been given that by the ancestors. And as I looked at the other members of the dream team, about 7 of us, each person had that ritual set. And I took that as a great blessing. But again, I wondered, so what do we do with this ritual set we've been given? Next slide. Then came Humanity Rising, and Jim had invited the dream team to present. So we only had 1 hour, and we took, in that time, the computer vetted 30 people who were able to share their dreams. Our question was, could it even work doing it virtually, since Chartres dream work is place-based, right? Next slide. As it happened, all of the dreamers that reported dreams that day had European ancestry, or some amount of European ancestry. Next slide, Rick. These are images from the dreams that were shared, and this is what we had to work with when the dream session was over. What are all these images saying? And uncharacteristically, it took 2 months, and we were still stumbling, trying to discern what could be the message. Over on the lower right corner, you'll see the 4 directions. One dreamer had the wheel with the different colors of the races of humankind. And there were dwarves pulling at this wheel. That was the key that unlocked the understanding just a few weeks ago, that what was being reported through these dreams, what was becoming manifest in these dreams, was the remembrance of a European creation story. Next slide, please. The story is symbolized by the European tree of life, and there were instances where the tree itself appeared in dreams. Next slide. When the insight came that the implicate order of the dreams that had been shared was a version of the European tree of life, and mind you, there's scattered bits and pieces all over Europe and Scandinavia of creation stories. When that insight came to me, I was at my desk here, and the insight didn't come in a flash. It was a build as I looked at the symbols, and the clues began to take shape as I was looking at the array of images I just shared with you on the last slide. When the realization that it was the tree of life, a European tree of life, and a creation story returning to European descended dreamers and our Chartres community, I was just covered with chills from head to toe, because it was an answer to what happens when our community separates. How can we embody? And the ancestors behind that ritual set at Chartres, from the hill of Chartres, spoke through these dreams and said, here is your template. Here is the way forward. Here is who we are in life with creation. When that realization came, one of our dream team members, Alejandra from Mexico, was with me. And I looked at her, and the second understanding came into my mind. And the understanding was this realization could not and did not come until the cusp of the Day of the Dead ceremonies in Mexico. Why I mention that is because Mexico has one of the strongest extant indigenous ancestral ceremonies, Day of the Dead, which is actually five days. Alejandra and I, she went back to Mexico for the ceremonies, and we got the help of a Huichol healer, Katira, and we told him what our opportunity was about the vision that had presented itself in these dreams, and asked would he help us during this Day of the Dead time, that we, the Chartres community, can be fully linked in a more intimate way with our ancestors and with our own original instructions through the Tree of Life. He readily agreed because he himself had just had a vision come to him 2 months earlier. His traditional teachings are glyphed and encoded in what they call codices. And he said his vision was that the pandemic would be healed when when our codices come together. And one of the missing codices is a codis from Europe. So with that, we embarked in 5 days of concurrent ceremony with each of the dreamers that reported their dreams, creating an altar. And each day, Katira would give us a particular way to focus our prayer. And he also sent us videos of what he was doing in Mexico as he prayed for us. Next slide, please. And at the end of the 5 days, what became clear from the question of what does it take for humanity to rise? The answer was renewing our sacred tree of life. And in co-participating in the Huichol Day of the Dead with our European ancestral tree present on their altar, and with our dreamers contemplating and valuing the messages from our dreams, we had reenacted the power given to us when the box of Gaul ritual accoutrement appeared in my hands and in the hands of the dreamers, which is your hands. The dreams that come to us and through us in Chartres are from and because we exist as a community of remembering souls, remembering people. This appearance of a ceremony now tells us that for humanity to rise, the intelligence that comes from that hill, from our ancestors, need a ceremony to move the insights and visions into three-dimensional world. And there will be another ceremony, maybe more, that show us how to move in our everyday lives, but collectively and inspired by that hill. This is the mystery of the hill of Chartres, and Humanity Rising shows us that even though we're disconnected from that consciousness for 1,500 or 2,000 years, the ancestors are right there waiting for us, compassionately loving us, and loving us so much they present us again with our template for living a life of creation, the tree of life. Now we have a lot of work to do, cleansing the symbols and the distortions on those trees and on the tree of our own family genealogy. And we have a community, we have a sacred site, we have the dream ceremony that showed itself to us, and we have all of the other ceremonies, talk Jim gives in the morning, the walk on the labyrinth. We have so much given to us from that hill for this time. We cannot possibly fail. As my ancestors tell me, who would not be wise to walk the path so long traveled by our ancestors? And next slide, Rick. So this is showing the Huichol people praying for us and for the reinvigoration of our tree of life. May it be so, and may these words and these images I've shared with you help ignite that fire of life and the passion to invigorate, renew, express, and live that template of creation passed down to us by our ancestors from so long ago. Ah, Mama, ua noa. Finished. Thank you.
So much. It's striking to me that you ended up with the tree of life. That is like so beautiful. And, we were on Humanity Rising. Many of you have been in the sessions with donut economics and regenerative economics with Ed Muller. And we've had, any number of sessions on all this. And Kate Rayworth, the brilliant woman economist that came up with donut economics with human well-being in the center and ecological constraints in the outer circle. And then when we had a week, a second program on it, we had a Maori woman. She says, no, it's not like that at all. The earth, the sacred tree, is in the middle. And humanity and all sentient conscious beings are in the peripheral, that it's all coming from the earth. And everyone had this extraordinary moment of exhilaration and release and understanding as you've concluded through your dreams, Pila, that if we're going to make it through this thing, it's about the tree of life. It's about honoring the mother out of which we all came. So, I mean, what you're doing could not be more important. And the beauty with which these slides were put together is quite something. So thank you for that. We now want to turn to Kayleen Asbo. Kayleen, you all know, has been gracing us one way or another almost all year with her pilgrimages and now various courses. And into next year, Kayleen is, really one of our star faculty in many different ways. Also doing a number of sessions on Humanity Rising. So Kayleen, it's always a pleasure, and we thought of you to make any comment you would like to make on the election just passed and some of the challenges, or what Ann said, or what Apila said, and then tell us a little bit about the course that you have coming up.
Thank you, Jem. Well, I'm absolutely just buzzing right now because what I feel like is this tapestry wrapped around that have threads of what Anne spoke about and what Lynn spoke about at the beginning of the hour and what Apila just shared with us. The image that you actually see on your screen is taken from the top of Mount Tamalpais, where I have spent the last
We
few
have an image up. Oh, I mean behind you. Sorry.
behind me, yes, is taken from the top of Mount Tamalpais, where for the past 3 days I've been in silent meditation retreat with the Buddhist teacher Mark Coleman, and where yesterday and the day before we went down into the woods and sat meditating at the base of the trees and listening to the trees. And in short, that is going to be such a deep and incredibly important part of the course that I'll be offering for Advent. One of the things that Apila just said was the importance of reclaiming and cleansing the images, particularly from the European heritage that we've had, and the pieces that have been lost, that have been buried, that have been hidden, and that now to bring them to light and to use them, to each of us claim them and to use them in service of the world. So what we will be doing is going back to look through art, through music, through poetry, at the deep, essential archetypal themes of this season that was so important during the very building of Chartres Cathedral. In the medieval period, the Advent time was a time of stillness, of deep listening, of waiting. In the great words of T.S. Eliot, "Be still, my soul," I said, "and wait. Wait without hope, for hope would be hope for the wrong thing. Wait without love, for love would be love of the wrong thing. There is yet faith, but the faith and the love lie in the waiting." And the invitation that Eliot extends to us and that Advent extends to us is to be present in that still place of waiting in the darkness as the images arise within us to birth something new. And all of us are feeling right now that we can't go back. This polarization, the swing back and forth and back and forth. And I've heard so many speak about, despite the pains of the COVID experience, despite the anguish of this year, we sense that something new must come into the world and that we must be the midwives of that new thing. But that new birth, that new humanity, that humanity rising, that divine child that needs to come into the light can only really come by opening to the deep and profound stillness that is connected with nature. And the first week of Advent throughout so many centuries, in the traditions that have their roots planted so deep on that hill in Chartres, are really about going into the wilderness, making straight our path, listening for the cries of the wilderness. What we'll be doing in this course is to return to the roots again and again and again as a prelude to the birth of what happens during those days when the world shifts from the light diminishing to the light emerging. And in that miraculous birth that none of us can anticipate, that we cannot imagine, it is so much about the reconciliation of opposites, which is what we are so desperately, desperately yearning for right now. So I'm going to show a few images here from the screen of things that I think will speak to us, both of this class that I'll be offering for Advent, but also the time that we are right now. If we think then of Advent as the waiting period for the miraculous unknown birth, the unexpected, what that might mean archetypally for each one of us. We'll be turning especially to the voices of the European ancestors in art and music, and then contemporary world poets to speak to that place in our minds that we know is neither left nor right, but poetry and music invite, along with art, this new imagining. And we'll be looking at this magnificent artwork, it's known as the Adoration of the Lamb, or the Van Eyck altarpiece, or the Ghent altarpiece. And in a nutshell, it holds the tension of the opposites in this extraordinary unfolding. What you see is the unfolded, open altarpiece that is in Belgium, but it begins closed with this herald of the unexpected and unfamiliar, and then opens up to showcase these themes of restoration and a new garden, a garden of harmony in which the wild masculine, and then this image, the contemplative feminine, crowned with roses and lilies, opening the new book of life, held at the heart. This will invite us into our space, and what we'll be doing is creating our own books, what I call soul books, inspired by Carl Jung's red books, through image and collage and dream and calligraphing the poems that come to us and resonate in our heart space. And we'll be finding then this new place of harmony. Notice this is this intense detail. It's only, a couple of inches in the actual altarpiece, but you can see all of these sacred symbols above the keyboard played by the angels, the keyboard that holds black and white together. We'll be exploring through the music of Johann Sebastian Bach and Hildegard of Bingen, this harmony of all creation where dissonance and tension and relaxation and consonance find their true marriage in harmony. Harmony that we're all yearning for. Harmony. And notice in these Van Eyck angels the incredible human expression on their faces. Some of them still squinched up saying, what? This is going to be the harmony for the moments of tension that we'll be holding during the weeks leading up to that solstice, and yet birthing itself in new celestial song. And as we go through the weeks of our course, these 4 weeks in which we weave together our image with art, music, and poetry, it will come and culminate in so many ways in this image by Gustav Klimt that actually depicts Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, that symphony that Beethoven wrote in the agony of his own illness, in his own profound deafness, that's based on a poem whose root is Dionysus, pre-Christian traditions, a hymn to Bacchus that becomes the Ode to Joy. And this final panel, and what you see is the Beethoven frieze with its exultant chorus, this kiss is for the whole world. The opening strains of the Ode to Joy, something that no one had heard before, when the choir and the symphony orchestra, 2 things that were thought to be opposites, joined together after this cacophonous descent in which we hear terror and plummeting. And then the soloist stands up and says, no more these sounds. Let us turn instead and sing a hymn of peace for the brotherhood of all humanity. That is going to be what we explore, and there could be no better time than to reclaim the beauty of the heritage, what Apela spoke of as the missing codex of the European ancestry. And perhaps that codex is not just words, but is song and is image as well. This great call that calls us all to unity. Pagan and Christian, masculine and feminine, sacred and secular, here in testimony, in art, in image, in song. We need it now more than ever. And we need to give birth to our own images inspired by these ancestral voices. So I hope that you might join me in this still time of the year to look inward, that looks to the coming again of the light with the Advent themes of peace and hope and love and joy. May we all listen deeply within, connected to the natural world without, for those images that wish to come forth in story, in image, in song. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Kayleen. I'm looking forward to Advent. This is going to be a beautiful time to celebrate, everyone. There's a lot to be thankful for. But 2020 has been, I think we entered 2020 thinking this was like 2020, this is going to be a big year somehow. And it was a big year in all the ways we least expected. And it's left many of us devastated and challenged in very, very powerful ways. So to be able to spend the next couple of weeks under your aegis, Kayleen, meditating on these matters. I love your art, the exquisiteness with which you use art in your presentations. It uplifts the soul. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome.
So everyone, I think that begins to bring us to a close. And Ruth will now sing us a song. And then we will adjourn and meet each other the second Sunday of December. I think it's the 13th of December. But thank you, everyone. This is a great day to celebrate the triumph of democracy. We have a lot of work to do, no doubt about it. But we just did the heavy lifting. And so there's cause for celebration and rejoicing on the streets of America and around the world. So in that spirit of just exuberance at the human spirit and humanity rising, Ruth, sing us a song, and then we'll close out.
This is a song about listening to trees. A poem by my sister, Elizabeth Cunningham. The trees say to me, talk to us, we're here, we can hear. I sing to them of our suffering and chaos and harm. I ask forgiveness for my kind. I ask for help from theirs. I sit with my back against the great white swamp oak. She tells me what the trees know, what we must come to know. There is no separation in the deep place. All our roots connect across continents, oceans, time. We are held in one weave with the tiniest things, gnats and one-celled swimmers with the hugest, eagles, whales, mountains, waves. We drink the same rain, turn to the same light, sigh with the same wind, return to the same earth. All that is can gather us in. All that is can heal us if we remember. The trees know, they want us to know, they know, they will help us know, they will help us.
They will help us. Thank you, Ruth. Apila, do you want to give us a benediction, a blessing before we part ways?
Sure. I'm here. In the flame that connects the worlds, the fire and the breathing of our tree of life, we give thanks. May the music, the words, the images of our community ignite the world in the remembrance and the renewal of life. Amen. Amen.
Thank you, Apila. Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Kayleen, Anne, Shelley. Thank all of you for joining today. And let us go out in the spirit of strength and thanksgiving. And let us consecrate ourselves to a new year coming and the tree of life, the sacred tree of life. Blessings, everyone. See you next month. Bye-bye.